All right, so today we are going to start on Chapter 9, Section 5. And this is factoring trinomials. And our trinomials are all in the format of x squared plus bx plus c. And so in all of our last terms, the c, the last term, is always going to be greater than 0, which means it's going to be positive. So we're going to attack those first and learn how to do those first. So basically, we're going to learn how to unfoil. We spent days and days learning how to foil and multiply two binomials, but now we're going to learn how to undo it. So let's just do a little quick review. If I have g plus 5, and I'm going to multiply it times g plus 2. So if we're going to foil, we're going to take the first, the outer, the inner, and the last. So the first term is g times g, which is g squared. And then the outer terms is 2 times g, and it's positive, it's 2g. The inner terms is positive, 5g, and then 5 times 2 is 10, positive 10. Then we normally our inner and our outer terms group together, and so we see that it's g squared plus 7g plus 10. All right, so that's working forward through foiling. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how we get from here and get back to there. How do we get, what are the two binomials that we multiplied to get to here? Well, first thing is we know that usually it's set up as two things. In the first one is a g, and the second one is a g, because we have g times g. So that's our first terms that we multiply. Now, what you do is first you think of this, and you think of, you look at this sign. If it's positive, and today all of ours are going to be positive, we ask ourselves, how can I multiply? Because the last term is two numbers multiplied. We multiplied two numbers to get to 10. So to get a positive number, I can either multiply a positive number times a positive number, or I can multiply a negative number times a negative number. All right? And then what I did is I combined the two middle terms to get here. Since it's positive, since I multiply a positive and a positive, I multiply to get that one. How do I get this one? I add two numbers to get that one. So this is going to be a plus plus. So if I put the plus and a plus, then I'm going to say, I'm going to list factors of 10. What are all the different ways to make 10? I can say 10 times 1, 1 times 10, or I can say 2 times 5. These are the only ways to get to 10. Well, to get this number, I could either have a 1 and a 10 there. But do you see that to get this number, the second term, I added a 5 and a 2 to get 7. So if I take these two numbers and take 1 plus 10, that makes 11. But if I take 2 plus 5, I get 7. So the answer has to be a 2 and a 5. And so I'm going to put a 2 and a 5. And you can switch them. It could be a 5 here and a 2 there. So I know that sounds really complicated, but that's the thought process. There's a lot of steps. So let's go through it one more time. Let's go through it a few more times. All right. So it can be done. We know we can do it. You have to pay close attention to figure out how we work backwards. So here's v squared plus 21v plus 20. So I know that it's going to be the format of a V plus or minus something and a V plus or minus something. I look at this term tells me, I think of this term and I think I multiply to get it. If I multiply to get this term, I need to multiply to get a positive. And to multiply to get a positive, if I multiply two numbers together and it's positive, I'm either multiplying a positive number times a positive number, or I could have a negative number times a negative number. This term I get by adding. I get this term by adding whatever two numbers I come up with. So the only way, if I have two positive numbers, for it to come positive, but if I added two negative numbers, it would be negative. So since this one tells me from multiplying, I multiply two positives together to get a positive, or I could have had two negatives to get a positive. So I know those are my two choices. Then I look over here and I say, okay, of those two choices, when I add two positive numbers, I get a positive. So that's the one I know it's going to be. Because if I add two negative numbers, I get a negative. So it has to be a plus, plus. So once I decide the sign, then I have to go through and I'm going to just list the factors. So we've listed the factors of 20. 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. All right, now I think of those numbers and I know they all multiply to be 20, so any of those could go here, but they have to add to be 21. Well, obviously we know 20 plus 1 is 21, because if I added this, 2 plus 10, I'd get 12. That doesn't work. And 4 plus 5, that's 9. If this was a 9, I'd pick this one. If this was a 12, I'd pick this one. But since it's a 21, it's got to be these two factors. It's got to be a 20 and a 1. And I can prove that this works to get this, so I can FOIL it, go forwards. This is my answer, but I want to prove that this is where I would get if I multiplied it. The first, outer, the inner, the last. V times V is V squared. This is a 1V and a 20V. And 1 times 20 is 20. And when I group my middle terms, I'm going to get the 21V. All right. I'm sure your heads are spinning. Maybe not. Let's try another one. All right. So we have A squared plus 13a plus 30. The first thing I have to do is I have to decide, is it plus plus or minus minus? Today, all we're going to do is it's either going to be a plus plus or a minus minus, because this is always going to be a positive here. So it's either a plus plus or a minus minus. I multiply to get a positive, so it's a plus plus or a minus minus, because a positive number times a positive number gives me a positive number, but also a negative number times a negative number gives me a negative number. So it's got to be one of these two. So I'm going to look over here. This is what I multiply to get. I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to add two positive numbers or two negative numbers, and they have to be positive. So it's got to be a positive, because if I added two negative numbers, this would be a negative. So it's plus, plus, and then I'm going to list all the factors of 30. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10. And I don't need to keep going unless you don't see it, but when I add this, it's 31. When I add that together, I get 17. But when I add 3 and 10, I get 13. So it's 3 and 10. Okay? All right, now I'm going to show you one where you would get a negative negative. So if you have k squared minus 10k plus 25. All right? So again, I always start over here. I look to see, oh, this is a positive, so the only way to get a positive when I multiply two numbers together is a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So to get that, now I look and say, okay, of those two choices, which one works when I add them together? I have to add a plus and a plus, I'm going to get a positive. That doesn't work. I have to add two negatives. So my answer is going to have, so my in factored form is going to be k minus something, k minus something. All right? So then I look at 25 and I list 1 times 25, and we have 5 times 5. That's the only way to make 25. Well, obviously, if I added a negative 1 and a negative 25, I'd get negative 26. But negative 5 and a negative 5 is a negative 10. And if you wanted to be very thorough, you could just refoil it to check. K times k is k squared. Then you're going to have a negative k, a negative 5k, another negative 5k, and a positive 25. When I add those two up, I get my negative 10 I was looking for. So that's going to definitely be my answer. All right, let's try another one. If you guys are ready, you can pause this. If you want me to work at another one, then go ahead and don't pause it. So the first thing you're going to do is decide the signs. And because it's a plus, it's either a plus plus or a minus minus. And then the second thing is I'm going to list the factors. And go through it methodically. Start with 1 times 36 and go through it because you don't want to miss anything. Sometimes you're sitting there hunting forever and you're like, I don't know what it is. It's because you didn't go through them all. You missed one. All right, so we know this is Q times Q. And you can pause this if you're ready. If not, then wait, because I have a couple more examples you can practice with. So Q times Q. And I'm going to decide, since this is a plus, it's either a plus plus or a minus minus. 2 positives make a positive, 2 negatives make a positive. So when I multiply, but when I add them together, it's got to be 2 negatives. So it's minus minus. And then my factors of 36 are 1 times 36, 2 times 18. So if I added those together, I'm going to get 37. That doesn't work. That's too big. 3 times 12. 3 times 12 is 36, and 3 plus 12 is 15. So it's a 3 and a 12. And you could definitely say Q minus 12 and Q minus 3. This is the commutative property. You can switch those. So either one, Q minus 3 times Q minus 12, or the other way around. All right. I'd like you guys to try this one. Hopefully you're catching on. You have x squared minus 11x plus 18. Find out the signs and then list the factors. Go ahead and pause this. Okay. So we see that this is a plus, so it's either a plus plus or a minus minus. And since I'm adding to get a negative, it's got to be the minus minus. So it's x minus something and x minus something. Listing the factors, I'm trying to get to 11. It's 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 2 plus 9 gives me the 11. So negative 2 plus a negative 9 is going to give me a negative 11. Because when I do the first terms I know, so I'm going to recheck it, FOIL. So the first terms give you x squared. The outer term is negative 9 times negative x is a negative 9x. This is a negative 2x. And a negative 2 times the negative 9 gives me the positive 18 that I was looking for. And when I group those together, I get my negative 11. Sorry about that. So when I group these together, I get my negative 11. All right. Are we having fun yet? All right, here's one more problem like that. So we have y squared minus 10y plus 16. So go ahead and factor that one. So it's an 8 and a 2.